I don't know where to begin. Maybe because every time I look back, I feel something inside me collapse a little. I never imagined that one day I would be telling my own story like this, voice trembling, hands unsteady, heart torn between love and the ache of what love can sometimes become. My name, well, I suppose my name doesn't matter as much as the pieces of myself I lost along the way. But for the sake of truth, I should say it. My name is Helen Ward, and for most of my life, I believed I had done things right. Quietly, humbly, simply. I wasn't the kind of woman who raised her voice. My world had always been soft, like cotton worn thin from years of being touched, used, needed. Maybe that softness was my flaw. Maybe it's why everything that happened the way it did. When my son Nathan was little, I used to stroke his hair every night until he fell asleep. He would curl his fingers into my clothes as if I were the only anchor that made sense to him. For him I was comfort, warmth, safety. There was a time he couldn't fall asleep unless he felt my heartbeat. Sometimes I wonder how that same child grew into a man who could look at me like I was nothing more than a burden he wished would shrink and disappear. But love makes you blind in soft ways. It's not loud blindness, it's quiet, slow. A blindness that feels like trust. The night everything changed, his wedding night, I remember how my cheeks burned. Not just from the slap. Pain on skin fades quickly. But the humiliation. Humiliation clings to a person like a smell that won't wash off no matter how hard they scrub. Her hand landed on my face before I could even understand what she was saying. Her voice, sharp, impatient, almost disgusted, echoed in that ballroom filled with people dressed in beautiful clothes and wearing even more beautiful lies. "You're selfish," she had said. "A woman your age doesn't need so much space." I didn't say anything back. I don't think I even could. My mouth felt dry, my eyes stung. And for a second my ears were ringing like someone had hit me with sound instead of a hand. All I remember is the soft clatter of my glasses hitting the polished floor. The way tiny shards skittered away under the shoes of people who refused to move. No one bent down. No one said, "Let me help." They all just stared, some pretending not to, others openly fascinated. And Nathan, my son, he just stood there. His eyes lowered. His hands limp by his sides. Not once did he reach toward me. Not once did he say, "Mom, are you all right?" It was the silence that broke me more than the slap. When someone you raised in your arms pretends not to see your pain, it removes something from your soul you can never get back. I left the ballroom slowly, as if every step carried the weight of years of cooking for him, praying for him, protecting him, believing in him. That night felt like walking out of a burning house, except the fire was inside me, not behind me. I don't know how I managed to find my phone with my hands shaking the way they were. I don't even remember dialing. I only remember the way my voice trembled when I whispered, "Come, please come. Bring the documents." The life I had hidden, the truth I had tucked away for decades, was about to be unwrapped. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I had nothing left to lose. Before I tell you what happened after that call, you need to understand how we ever reached such a point. Because pain never begins suddenly. It builds quietly, layer by layer, long before anyone bleeds. It was 2.5 years before the wedding when Nathan first introduced her to me. Her name was Camilla. She was beautiful. Not just physically, but in that polished, deliberate way some people carry themselves, like they know exactly which expression to wear at which moment. Her smile was perfect. Too perfect, maybe. It never reached her eyes, but at the time I convinced myself it was simply nerves. Or maybe I wanted to believe that she was just cautious around me. After all, she was meeting the mother of the man she loved. When she stepped inside my apartment, I saw it immediately, that flicker. Her eyes scanned the room like a camera capturing flaws in a space meant for judgment. I lived simply. A modest apartment, hand-me-down furniture, curtains I had sewn myself years ago when the days still felt lighter. It embarrassed me sometimes, but it was mine. It held memories of my late husband, of laughter that once filled this home. My life wasn't grand, but it was honest. But to Camilla it was something else. She didn't say anything cruel that day, but her silence said enough. Later that night when they left, I stood alone in the quiet of my living room and realized something I couldn't admit to myself at the time. My son wasn't bringing home a woman who wanted to build a life with him. He had brought home someone evaluating what she could take, what she could gain, what she could reshape. The months that followed, they were small cuts. Nothing big enough to call disrespect. Nothing big enough to start a conflict. Just quietly painful moments that fell like slow rain, soaking me deeper than I realized. "You should consider moving somewhere safer," she would say. Or, "This neighborhood is too expensive for a single elderly woman." Or, "Are you sure you're managing your finances well?" All spoken with a soft tone, a sweet smile. But the sweetness was like artificial sugar. Pretty, pleasant, but fake. And Nathan, he absorbed her words. Little by little, like someone learning a new belief system, he began repeating her suggestions, her concerns, her doubts. I remember the first time I heard him use the phrase, people your age. People your age. I never thought my own son would put me into a category that placed me below him, as if age erased intelligence, as if wrinkles dissolved dignity. But I stayed quiet. I always stayed quiet. I suppose I was afraid. Afraid of losing him if I confronted him. Afraid of being alone. Afraid of being unloved by the only family I had left. You tell yourself it's just a phase, that he's under pressure, that he'll come back to you emotionally once life settles. You convince yourself that all relationships bend sometimes, but they won't break. Not yours. Not a mother and her child. But you don't realize that bending feels exactly like breaking, when you're the only one trying to stay whole. There were nights I would sit in my kitchen with the lights off, just listening to the hum of the refrigerator and praying. Really praying. That the distance between us was only temporary. That he would remember the woman who stayed awake at his bedside every time he fell sick. That he would hear my voice in his memories the way I still heard his childish laughter echoing in mine. But life teaches you that love does not return just because you offered it freely. Sometimes you pour everything into someone and they grow into someone who cannot even see your emptiness. The months passed. Their engagement happened faster than I expected. When she announced it, her smile sparkled like a woman who had achieved something she had been working toward for a long time. The wedding planning began. The pressure increased. Every visit to my apartment felt like an inspection. Every conversation felt like a test I was failing. You really should move somewhere smaller, she said once, sitting comfortably on my couch like she owned it. It doesn't make sense for someone your age to have so much space. My son nodded. He nodded to her, not to me. I smiled politely that day. I even offered them tea. But inside I felt a small crack form in a part of my heart that had once been unbreakable. One night after they had left, I sat on the floor in the silence and finally allowed myself to cry. Not because I felt sad, but because for the first time in my life I felt invisible to my own child. You don't know what that kind of invisibility does to a person until it happens to you. It was during those months that I discovered the truth. Their debts. Their desperation. Their plan. It was like watching a slow-motion accident. And realizing I was the target, not the witness. I kept quiet. I observed. I listened through closed doors and half-opened windows. I heard things a mother should never hear. Words about me spoken like I was an obstacle, not a human being with a heart. The line shattered on his wedding night. The slap was only the surface. The real wound was the confirmation of something I had tried so hard not to believe. My son no longer saw me as his mother. He saw me as a problem. The humiliation in front of 130 people wasn't something I could explain away. It wasn't something time could smooth over. It wasn't something love could excuse. My cheek burned, but my heart broke quietly, almost gently, like something that had been fragile for a long time and finally gave up. I left the ballroom. I walked to my car. I sat inside, breath trembling as if my body didn't know whether to cry or collapse. And then I made the phone call. A soft, whispering voice, my voice, said the words I never thought I would have to say. It's time to bring everything. And as I waited for the man who knew more about my life than my own son ever did, I understood something painful, something final. They had forced me into a corner. A quiet woman pushed far enough become someone unrecognizable. And that night, the quiet woman finally decided to stop being silent. I remember sitting in my car that night, hands still trembling, heart beating as if it wanted to escape my chest. The lights from the ballroom spilled onto the parking lot like pieces of a world I no longer belonged to. Somewhere inside that building, my son was celebrating a new beginning, while I was silently witnessing the end of something I thought could never die. I kept touching the side of my face where the slap had landed. My skin had already stopped stinging, but the echo of her hand remained like a mark no one could see. I think what hurt the most wasn't the pain. It was the realization that nobody in that room thought I deserved better. They saw it happen. They watched me bend down to pick up the broken pieces of my own glasses. They watched me leave. But not one soul followed me. Not one asked if I needed help. I remember whispering to myself, "Stay quiet. Don't cry here." Not because tears would make me weak, but because I didn't want to give them more reasons to think I was fragile or dramatic or inconvenient. I sat there in the darkness, my fingers curling around the steering wheel like I needed something to hold on to. For years my son had been that something. But that night he wasn't mine anymore. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I looked at the screen and saw a name that pulled me back from the edge of falling apart. Daniel. The only person I trusted enough to call. The only person who knew the truth before anyone else. The only one I told about the assets I had hidden away, not because I was secretive, but because I had learned long ago that sometimes protecting your child means protecting them from themselves. I answered with a shaking breath. "Where are you?" he asked, his voice calm, steady, the opposite of everything inside me. "In the parking lot," I whispered. I'm fine. Just bring the documents." There was a pause, the kind of pause that carries concern rather than judgment. "I'll be there in 10 minutes, he said. "Don't drive. Don't move. Just breathe." His words were simple, but in that moment, they felt like a warm hand on my back, gently holding me together. I leaned my head back against the seat and stared up at the ceiling of the car. I tried to swallow the heaviness in my throat, but it stayed, thick, unmoving, like grief that had nowhere else to go. When I finally stepped out of the car for some air, the night felt colder than it should have. Or maybe it was just me. Maybe everything feels cold when something inside you dies. I stood there on the edge of the parking lot, watching cars pass like strangers who had no idea a mother's heart had been broken a few feet away. And then I saw Daniel's car pull in. He stepped out quickly, jacket half-buttoned, sleeves rolled up as if he had rushed the entire way. He wasn't family. He wasn't a longtime friend. He wasn't someone with emotional ties. He was my financial advisor, someone who managed my affairs professionally, someone who became a confidant slowly and quietly over the years. But in that moment, he was the only person who showed up for me. The contrast was painful. A stranger cared more than my own son. "Are you hurt?" he asked, gently holding my arms. "Your face, it's red." I looked away, embarrassed. "I'm fine." "No, you're not." His voice softened. "What happened?" I opened my mouth, but for a moment nothing came out. My throat felt locked. My lips trembled. I wanted to be strong, but the words got stuck in the sadness that had been piling up inside me for years. "She hit me," I whispered finally, "in front of everyone. And he just stood there." Daniel inhaled slowly, the kind of breath someone takes when they're trying not to anger on your behalf. "Sit," he said, guiding me to the passenger seat. "You don't have to explain everything now." But I needed to. Not for him, for myself. So I could breathe again. "She's been trying to push me out," I said softly. "For months. And Nathan, he listens to her. He thinks I'm in the way." The moment I said those words, something inside me cracked. I wasn't his mother anymore. I was an inconvenience. Daniel didn't say anything at first. He just listened, which somehow made it easier for me to continue. I kept hoping she'd change. That maybe after the wedding things would get better. But tonight I think they wanted something else. I think they wanted to show me my place. My voice broke. And they did. He closed his eyes, shaking his head slowly. "They don't deserve you," he said. His tone was steady, but his expression held quiet anger. "You've done everything for your son." I gave a sad little laugh, not out of humor, but because of how strange it sounded. "No," I said softly. "I didn't do everything. That's what hurts. I gave too much. I loved too blindly. I stayed too quiet. I should have taught him how to value people, not things. Maybe I failed somewhere." "You didn't fail," he said firmly. "But mothers always feel like failures when their children hurt them. It's an instinct we can't unlearn." Daniel placed a folder on my lap, the documents I had asked for, the ones I hoped I would never need. Ownership papers, bank accounts, property deeds, investments. All the things I had accumulated quietly over decades, all the things no one, not even my son, knew about. "Are you sure you want to do this tonight?" he asked. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling. Not with fear, but with the realization that I couldn't go back to pretending anymore. "Yes," I whispered. "I want them to know the truth. Not because I want revenge, but because they need to understand what they threw away." He nodded. "Then I'll stand with you." There are moments in life when a simple sentence can make a shattered heart feel held. That was one of those moments. We drove back toward the hall, but I didn't go inside. I couldn't. Instead, I stood at the entrance, watching from a distance as the last of the guests congratulated each other. Laughter spilling out of the doorway like warm light. I didn't belong in that light anymore. But I didn't want to crawl back into darkness either. I waited until the place emptied enough that their voices could be heard clearly. Nathan and Camilla stepped out, her arm locked around his, the perfect couple in their perfect outfits, walking into their perfect new life. Except perfection is often a costume people wear to hide their truth. Daniel handed me the folder before stepping back, giving me space but not leaving. When my son saw me standing there, his expression fell. Not out of guilt, out of annoyance. "Mom, what are you doing here?" he said. "I thought you left." Camilla smirked slightly and crossed her arms. "She probably wants to make a scene," she said under her breath. A scene. It was ironic. The woman who slapped me in front of a crowd was worried I would make a scene. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't let my anger speak. I just stepped closer, holding the folder gently like it was nothing more than an old notebook. I wanted to give you something, I said quietly. What is it now? Camilla snapped. Nathan didn't stop her. He didn't even look at her. He looked at me like a man waiting impatiently for a bus that's running late. I opened the folder with careful fingers. These are my properties, I said softly. My investments. My accounts. Nathan frowned. What are you talking about? I took a breath. You assumed I had nothing. You assumed the house I live in is old and small because I'm poor. You assumed I needed guidance. You assumed I had no life outside the four walls I raised you in. Camilla stepped forward. Are you trying to manipulate him now? Daniel finally spoke. She's stating facts. Nothing more. Nathan stared at the documents as if he couldn't understand the words on them. Mom. Why didn't you tell me? A soft, sad smile tugged at my lips. Because you never asked, I whispered. There was a long silence, one of those heavy pauses where truth hangs in the air like fog. I looked at him, really looked at him. At the boy I had raised. At the man I didn't recognize. When you were a child, I said, I dreamed of seeing you happy. Truly happy. Not just in the way you present yourself to the world, but in the way your heart rests when no one is watching. I wanted to give you good values, not good money. I wanted to give you strength, not wealth. I swallowed hard. I failed. Not because you don't have those things, but because you can't see the difference anymore. Camilla rolled her eyes. Oh please, this is emotional manipulation. I didn't even look at her. Tonight, I said softly, when you let her slap me, something inside me broke, Nathan. Something I can't rebuild. He opened his mouth, maybe to defend himself, maybe to apologize, I'll never know. Because I held up my hand gently and said, no, it's all right. I'm not angry. I'm just tired. Camilla scoffed. So what, now you're going to cut him off? Keep everything for yourself. I shook my head. No, I just want him to understand what respect means. What dignity means. What a mother's heart means. I closed the folder and handed it back to Daniel. From now on, I whispered, I'll handle things differently. Nathan took a step forward. Mom. But I stepped back. Not out of anger. Out of acceptance. You made your choice, I said softly. Tonight. I'm making mine. And then I turned away. Not with pride. Not with defiance. But with the quiet ache of a woman who has finally accepted the truth she didn't want to see. Daniel walked beside me. Not touching me, not rushing me. Just matching his pace to mine like someone who understood the weight I was carrying. And as we walked into the night, I realized something painful but freeing. Sometimes the deepest strength comes not from fighting, but from finally letting go of the people who keep breaking you. The night after the wedding felt heavier than the sky itself. I went home, but home didn't feel like home anymore. The walls seemed unfamiliar, the rooms too quiet, the furniture too still. As if the house itself was afraid to breathe with me. I closed the door gently behind me, yet the sound echoed like a punch. It's strange how a single moment can change the shape of your world. A single slap. A single silence. A single look from the child you raised. I walked slowly across the living room, touching the back of the sofa, the corner of the table, the picture frame on the shelf, touching these things as if they were anchors keeping me from drifting away. But nothing felt steady. My fingers brushed over an old photograph. Nathan at age 7 holding a toy airplane. His smile was wide, his hands were dirty from playing, his hair messy, and his eyes were full of trust. He used to run to me with scraped knees and trembling lips, whispering, Mom, it hurts. And I would kiss his forehead and say, it'll get better. I promise. Back then he believed me. Back then my words were enough. Now my words didn't mean anything to him. I placed the picture back slowly, my hand lingering on the frame for a moment longer than necessary. Felt like I was touching a ghost. When I finally sat down on the sofa, I didn't cry right away. I just stared at the blank wall, breathing as if every breath needed permission. My mind replayed the wedding night over and over. The slap, the way the room fell silent, the way everyone watched me leave but no one followed. And then Nathan's expression. The one thing that cut deepest. He didn't reach for me. He didn't even flinch. A part of me kept whispering, why, Nathan? Why didn't you stand up for me? But I knew the answer. I had seen it happen slowly, piece by piece. A mother knows when her child is drifting away. She can feel the distance like cold air under a closed door. I leaned back, closing my eyes, trying to calm the storm inside my chest. The house around me was humming quietly, the refrigerator buzzing, the clock ticking, the old wooden floor settling. It was the same house, same sounds, same walls, yet everything felt different. After an hour or so, I heard a soft knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. For a moment, my heart tightened with fear. Fear of confrontation, fear of more pain. But when I opened the door, it was Daniel. He stood there with a small bag in his hand and a tired expression on his face. "I didn't want you to be alone tonight," he said softly. "I brought you some tea." For a moment I couldn't speak. My throat tightened again, the same way it had earlier when I told him what happened. It felt strange, the idea that someone had thought about me enough to come to my door this late. "You didn't have to," I whispered. "I know," he replied. "That's why I came." His voice was calm. Not comforting, not emotional, just steady. And that steadiness felt like something I could hold on to. Something that wouldn't slip through my fingers. He stepped inside with my permission and placed the tea on the kitchen counter. I saw him look around, noticing the framed photos, the simple furniture, the thin curtains I had hemmed myself. He wasn't judging anything. He was simply observing, quietly, respectfully. "You should drink something warm," he said, opening the container. "You've had a shock." Shock? Yes, that's exactly what it was. A shock that had reached so deep it didn't even feel like pain anymore. Just numbness. I sat down, wrapping my fingers around the warm cup he handed me. The steam rose gently, carrying the faint scent of chamomile. I lifted it to my lips, but I didn't drink. I just held it there, inhaling the warmth, feeling it against my skin. "You don't have to talk," he said quietly, sitting across from me. "Not tonight." But talking was the only thing keeping me from drowning in my own thoughts. "He didn't look at me," I whispered. "Not once. After everything I did for him. He couldn't even look at me when she hit me." Daniel's eyes softened. "When someone chooses pride over love," he said, "they lose more than they gain." I gave a weak smile that faded as soon as it appeared. "I didn't want to humiliate him," I said. "I didn't want to show him the documents tonight. I wanted to wait. But after what happened, I couldn't carry the weight anymore." "You weren't wrong," he replied. "You were honest." I shook my head slowly. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I just wanted him to see that I'm not someone he can push aside. I'm not disposable. My voice broke on that last word. I felt something warm slide down my cheek. A single tear at first, then another. I placed the cup down before I dropped it. My hands trembled uncontrollably, the tremor traveling from my fingertips to my arms, to my shoulders. Daniel didn't move closer. He didn't touch me. He just sat there, allowing me the space to fall apart quietly, the same way I used to hold Nathan when he was small. After a minute, he spoke again. "You know," he said softly, "some people don't realize the value of something until it stops trying to be part of their lives." I wiped my face, my fingers brushing the lingering wetness. "I don't want to disappear," I whispered. "I just want to be treated like a mother, like a human being." "You deserve that," he said. The words lingered in the air between us. We sat there for a long time. The tea grew cold. The clock kept ticking. Outside, the world continued as if nothing had happened. But something had. Something irreversible. After a while, Daniel stood up and put on his coat. "Call me if you need anything," he said. "Any time. Day or night." I nodded. "Thank you," I whispered. He hesitated at the door, then added, "You're not alone. Not tonight, not tomorrow." When he left, the house felt different again. Not empty but quietly held. I walked to my bedroom slowly, turned on the bedside lamp, and sat on the edge of the bed. The shadows stretched across the walls like memories. Memories of simpler years. Warmer years. Years when the world made sense. I lay down but sleep wouldn't come. My mind kept replaying his words, "You're not alone." And yet, the bed felt larger, the room colder, the silence louder. I don't know what time it was when exhaustion finally dragged me into sleep. But even then my dreams were restless, filled with echoes of a hand striking my face and a pair of eyes that didn't blink. When morning came, it didn't bring peace. It brought questions. What would my life look like now? Would Nathan come to see me? Would he apologize? Would he even care? I didn't know. But as I sat on the edge of the bed with my hands clasped together, something inside me whispered gently, "This is not the end. It's the beginning of truth. The truth I had avoided. The truth they never expected. The truth that would shape every day that followed." And with a slow, shaky breath, I stood up to face whatever came next. The morning after the wedding felt heavy in a way I can't describe. It wasn't just sadness. It was a different kind of weight, like my chest had been filled with stones during the night, one painful memory at a time. When I opened my eyes, for a moment I didn't even remember where I was. Then the truth washed over me slowly, painfully, like cold water trickling down my spine. I sat up carefully. My body felt older than it was. My joints stiff, my forehead tight from crying, my throat dry from all the things I couldn't say out loud. The house was still. Too still. As if it was waiting for me to take the first breath of the day before it dared to move with me. I swung my legs off the bed, and for a few seconds I just sat there, staring at the floor, trying to gather the courage to stand. It's strange how grief can turn even the simplest action into something that needs strength. I rubbed my palms against my knees, took a deep breath, and whispering softly to myself, "Just stand, just this much." When I walked into the living room, the sunlight was creeping in through the thin curtains. It painted long streaks of pale warmth across the room. Normally I loved mornings. They always felt like a quiet promise that maybe today will be softer than yesterday. But that morning the light felt indifferent, like it was shining because it had to, not because the world deserved its warmth. I decided to make tea, not because I was thirsty, but because I needed something to hold, something warm to steady my hands. The kettle clicked, the water boiled, the cup filled, the same routine I had followed for years. Yet today it felt foreign, mechanical, as if my body remembered the steps even when my heart didn't. As I sipped the tea, I glanced at my phone. No messages. No missed calls. No "Mom, can we talk?" No "Are you okay?" Not even from him. A small part of me still hoped he would reach out. I'm not proud of that hope, but it was there, quiet, stubborn, refusing to die. Mothers never fully stop hoping, even when everything tells them to. After an hour or so, the doorbell rang. The sound startled me. It felt too sharp for a morning like this. I hesitated, setting my cup down with trembling fingers, and walked slowly toward the door. When I opened it, there he was. My son, Nathan. For a heartbeat I felt something warm in my chest, relief maybe, or love trying to stand up again even after being knocked down so terribly. His face looked tired, his tie loosened, hair messy, eyes a little red. It almost felt like looking at the boy he used to be. But then he opened his mouth. "Can we talk?" he said. His tone wasn't gentle. It wasn't remorseful. It was defensive, tense, like someone who had come to fix a problem, not mend a relationship. I stepped aside and let him in. My hands were folded, my heart too fragile to beat normally. He walked inside, not looking around like he usually did. He went straight to the living room and stood with his back to me for a few seconds. Then he turned around abruptly. "Why did you bring those documents last night?" he demanded. The question hit me harder than the slap ever did. "No, how are you?" "No, I'm sorry. Just a question about money." I swallowed the ache rising in my chest. "I didn't bring them to threaten you," I said softly. "I brought them because I wanted you to know the truth." "What truth?" He frowned. "That you've been hiding all this from me? From your own son." "My love wasn't hidden from you," I whispered. "Everything else was just protection." "For who?" he snapped. "For yourself." "For you," I said, my voice breaking. "Always for you." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "Camilla thinks." I closed my eyes. There it was. Her name. Every sentence he spoke came wrapped in her name. Every thought he had passed through her filter before reaching me. I felt myself shrinking again, the way I had been shrinking for months, bit by bit, becoming smaller so he wouldn't find me inconvenient. "Camilla thinks what?" I asked gently. "That you're trying to manipulate me," he said, not meeting my eyes. "You embarrassed us last night. You made a scene." I stared at him silently. My heart didn't break this time, it just sighed. A long, tired sigh inside my ribs. "Nathan," I whispered. She slapped me. In front of everyone. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't push anyone. I didn't fight. I walked away quietly. "That's not the point," he insisted. "You should have come to me privately if you had something to say." "I couldn't," I said softly. "Because you no longer listen privately." He froze. I continued, my voice trembling but steady enough to finish. "You only hear what she wants you to hear." He exhaled sharply, as if my words irritated him. "You're overreacting. Camilla cares about you. She just thinks you've been too emotional lately." Too emotional. My lips parted slightly. My breath caught. So this was who I had become in his eyes. A dramatic old woman who cried too much, talked too softly, loved too deeply. "Nathan," I said quietly, "listen to yourself. You didn't come here to ask if I'm okay. You came here to defend her. I came here to understand why you hid these things from me. And you still haven't asked how I feel." He looked away, jaw tight. "I'm here now, aren't I?" he muttered. "Being here isn't the same as being present," I whispered. He didn't reply. That silence was sharp, cutting right between us. I took a slow breath. I didn't tell you about my assets because I didn't want money to shape our relationship, I said softly. I wanted love to do that. That's unrealistic, he said. People need stability. I gave you stability, I replied gently. I just didn't give you control. He flinched. I'm not trying to take anything from you, Nathan. I never was. I just wanted to be respected. I wanted to be seen. His shoulders tensed. He didn't like hearing that. Maybe he didn't know how to respond. Or maybe he knew the truth but didn't want to admit it. Just then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Camilla's name lit up brightly. He answered immediately. Yeah, I'm here. No, she's calm. I told you I'm handling it. I closed my eyes as his voice drifted through the room. He hadn't come for me. He had come for her. When he hung up, he avoided my gaze. I have to go, he said. She's waiting. Of course she was. He moved toward the door, but before leaving he paused. We can talk later, he said, as if offering a favor. I nodded faintly, even though I knew he didn't mean it the way a son should. When the door closed behind him, I felt the silence wrap around me again. But this time it wasn't just silence. It was goodbye. Not the loud kind. Not the dramatic kind. Just the soft, painful kind that happens when someone you love slowly chooses a life that doesn't have room for you anymore. I walked back to the kitchen, picked up my cold tea and held it close to my chest. For the first time, I whispered something I had never allowed myself to think before. My son doesn't see me anymore. And the moment I said it, my heart finally understood it. This was the beginning of a different chapter. A lonelier one. A quieter one. But a true one. And for the first time, I knew I couldn't keep chasing someone who no longer looked back. After Nathan left that morning, the house felt painfully hollow. I kept hearing the echo of the door closing in my mind. Soft, final. Like a curtain falling before the end of a show I never wanted to be part of. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the empty space where he had stood just minutes earlier, trying to understand if I had imagined the whole thing. But no, the silence he left behind was too heavy to be imagined. There is a loneliness that comes from living alone. And then there is the loneliness that comes from being forgotten by someone whose heartbeat once matched yours. The second kind, it's a different ache entirely. It settles in your bones, in the folds of your breath, in the spaces between your thoughts. I walked to the sofa slowly and sat down, my hand still wrapped around the cup I never finished drinking from. The tea had turned completely cold, but somehow holding it made me feel a little less empty, like something warm once existed there even if it didn't anymore. I stared at the door, half expecting, half hoping that he would walk back in, that he would take a step inside and say, "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that." But the quiet kept answering me instead. After what felt like an hour, I stood up and looked around the living room as if seeing it for the first time. Everything looked the same, yet everything had changed. The cushions, the curtains, the faded rug. They had all been part of my happiest years. Now they held memories of a life that no longer felt like mine. I walked over to the shelves where old photo frames lined the wood. Pictures of Nathan at every age, his first day of school, his graduation, a family picnic, birthdays with messy frosting on his cheeks, moments when he used to grab my hand and pull me toward the camera, wanting me to be part of every memory. Years ago, I stood next to him in every picture. Today, I wasn't even part of his wedding. My fingertips brushed across the glass covering one of the pictures, tracing the shape of his smile. That innocent curve of his lips. That little boy was still somewhere inside him, I told myself. Maybe buried under pressure, under influence, under a person who held too much power in his life. But he was there. I whispered under my breath. "Where did I lose you?" There was no answer. By midday, I decided to step outside for fresh air. Not because I wanted to, but because staying indoors felt like drowning. I changed into a simple sweater, slipped my shoes on and stepped out into the hallway. The elevator ride felt unusually long, even though it was just a few floors. When I reached the street, the city was busy as always. Cars honking, people walking fast, shops opening their doors. Life doesn't pause for anyone's heartbreak. It just keeps moving, almost unapologetically. I walked slowly, letting the noise wrap around me. Sometimes external chaos is easier to handle than internal silence. As I reached the small park nearby, I found an empty bench under a tree and sat down. Leaves rustled overhead, children laughed in the distance, a dog barked as it ran after a ball. Normal sounds of a world that didn't know my story. I closed my eyes and inhaled deeply, trying to ground myself. And then, I heard someone sit beside me. I opened my eyes gently. It was Daniel. He held 2 cups of coffee, one of which he extended toward me. "You weren't answering my messages," he said softly. "So I figured you needed company." I blinked. I didn't hear my phone. He smiled faintly. It's all right. I just wanted to check on you. I took the coffee carefully. My fingers brushed his briefly, and for a second, the contact felt like a reminder that I wasn't entirely invisible. Did Nathan call you? He asked. My throat tightened, but I nodded. Yes. And I exhaled slowly. He thinks I embarrassed him. He thinks I used the documents to manipulate him. Daniel closed his eyes briefly, as if he needed a moment to absorb the weight of my words. You don't deserve this, he murmured. I looked down at my lap. Mothers don't love because they are treated well. They love because it's their nature. He turned his head, studying my face with a softness I wasn't used to. And he takes advantage of that nature. No, I shook my head gently. He's confused. He's lost in someone else's shadow. Maybe he thinks he's doing the right thing. But at what cost? Daniel asked quietly. At the cost of your dignity? The word dignity struck me like a stone. I whispered, I don't want to lose him. I'll lose myself first. He stared at me for a long second, his expression gentle but filled with something like sadness. You already have, he said softly. Piece by piece. For years. I felt tears rising again, but I fought them. Crying in front of him felt too vulnerable, too exposing, even though he had seen me at my weakest the night before. We sat in silence for a few minutes, listening to the wind, the children, the distant traffic. I don't know what he expects now, I finally said. He walked out like I owed him something, like everything I did was wrong, like I'm the problem. What do you expect? He asked gently. I looked at him, surprised by the question. I don't expect anything, I whispered. Expectations hurt. I only want him to remember I'm his mother. Daniel nodded slowly. Maybe it's time you remember that too, he said softly. You're his mother. Not his servant. Not his obstacle. Not his wallet. His mother. His words touched something deep inside me. Something I had pushed down for years. As we sat there, I realized how exhausted I was. Not just from the slap, not just from the humiliation, not just from the harsh conversation, but from years of shrinking myself so he wouldn't feel burdened by my presence. I had been disappearing long before he pushed me out. When I returned home later, the apartment felt different again. Not lighter. Not warmer. But clearer in a strange way. Like a window I had ignored for too long had finally been wiped clean. I walked over to the drawer where I kept important things and pulled out a small box. A wooden one my husband had carved for me years ago. Inside it were old letters, small keepsakes, a few memories I couldn't let go of, and a key. The key to the house I had kept hidden. The house no one knew was mine. My quiet future. My quiet escape. I held the key in my palm and closed my hand around it. Maybe it was time to think about myself. Maybe it was time to breathe without worrying who needed me next. Maybe it was time to step away before I shattered completely. Not out of revenge. Not out of pride. But out of survival. By evening, when the sun dipped low and the sky turned a soft orange, I made myself a quiet dinner and sat at the table alone. I ate slowly, each bite feeling heavier than the last. The loneliness didn't go away, but it felt tolerable. When night arrived, the house settled into its usual stillness. I changed into my nightclothes and stood by the window for a long time, watching the streetlights flicker like distant stars. Then I whispered something I had never allowed myself to say aloud before. I deserve peace. My voice trembled, but it didn't break. For the first time in a long while, that felt like strength. And as I lay down to sleep, I realized something painful but necessary. Love can be unconditional. Respect cannot. And I was done living without it. The days that followed were some of the quietest days of my life. Not peaceful quiet. Empty quiet. A kind of silence that sits on your chest until breathing feels like a chore. After that conversation with Nathan, I felt something shift inside me. Not because he disappointed me, but because I finally stopped lying to myself. I woke up each morning with a heaviness I couldn't shake off. The apartment felt colder, the walls more distant, the floor colder under my feet. Even the air felt heavier. Like every breath I took carried a reminder of what I had lost. Every morning I waited, looked at the phone, listened for footsteps in the hallway, imagined hearing the doorbell ring. He didn't come. He didn't call. He didn't ask how I was. My son had walked out once, but his absence kept walking back in. Still, I tried to stay busy. I cleaned the house even when it was already clean. I rearranged the linen closet even though everything was in its place. I took out old clothes, folded them again, put them back. I stood in front of the fridge, staring at shelves without knowing what I wanted. It wasn't routine. It was survival. A mother does strange things when she's trying not to fall apart. One afternoon, as I stood in the living room dusting the shelves, my hand paused on a picture frame. There he was, barely 8 years old, missing a front tooth, grinning up at me like the world was simple and pure and safe. My chest tightened. "I didn't raise you for this," I whispered to the picture. "But maybe I raised you too gently. Maybe I forgot to teach you how to love back." My voice cracked on that last word. As I stared at that photo, I remembered something I hadn't thought about in years: the day he lost his first tooth. He had cried so loudly, so dramatically, clutching his mouth as if the world had ended. I rushed to him, held him in my arms, rocked him until he calmed down. And even then, with tears on his cheeks, he held my shirt tightly and said, "Don't let go, Mommy. But people change. Time changes them. Influence changes them. People don't hold on forever. One day you look down, and their small hand isn't in yours anymore." That memory broke me in a way humiliation never could. I sat on the floor that day. Just sat there with dust on my fingers and pain in my chest, thinking about how love ages differently in every heart. In mine it had grown old, gentle, wrinkled, tired. But in his, maybe it had died. That evening Daniel called. His number flashed on the screen, and for a second I almost ignored it. Not because I didn't want to talk, but because I didn't want my brokenness to show through my voice. But he called again. So I answered. "Are you home?" he asked. "Yes," I whispered. "I'm coming over." "No," I said quickly, I'm fine." "Okay," he said, completely unfazed. "Then I'm still coming over." I didn't argue again. Maybe because I didn't have the strength to. When he arrived, he didn't ask permission. He walked inside gently, set a paper bag on the table and said, "I brought dinner." I didn't realize until then how hungry I was. Not for food. For company. For someone whose presence didn't hurt. We sat down at the table, the soft clinking of plates the only sound between us. I ate slowly, tasting almost nothing, but the warmth of the food felt comforting. After a few minutes, Daniel spoke. "You've been quiet," he said. "I've always been quiet." "Not like this," he replied gently. I looked down at my bowl. "I'm just tired." He studied my face. "Of him." I shook my head. "Of waiting." Daniel leaned back in his chair. "He'll come around," he said softly. "People don't realize the damage they cause until they face the consequences." "I don't want consequences," I whispered. "I just want my son back." "And what if he returns only for your money?" Daniel asked, his voice carefully calm. My heart dropped. And the worst part was, I didn't have an answer. After dinner, he washed the dishes even though I insisted he didn't need to. When I tried to help, he shook his head. "You've done enough," he said. His words hit deeper than he probably meant them to. Later, we walked to the balcony. The night air felt cool, soothing, almost like it was comforting me. The city lights blinked far below us, tiny and distant, like memories I couldn't reach anymore. "Have you thought about what you want to do next?" Daniel asked. "I don't know," I said softly. "I keep thinking if I should go to the other house. Stay there for a while. Let things settle." "Do you want to leave?" he asked gently. "Yes," I said. Then pausing, I added, "But not because I'm running away." "Why then?" I inhaled deeply, my breath shaky. "Because I'm running out of pieces to give away." He didn't respond for a long moment. "You know," he finally said, "you don't have to be alone in this house. If you decide to move, I can help you. With everything." His kindness caught me off guard. I lowered my head, tears welling up again. "Why do you help me so much?" I asked quietly. He hesitated, then said, "Because someone should have helped you long ago." I closed my eyes. His words felt like a soft hand placed over my heart. After he left, the house didn't feel as cold as it had in the morning. Not warm, but not freezing either. Something in his presence had softened the edges of my loneliness. But nighttime is never gentle with a wounded heart. When I lay in bed, sleep refused to come. My mind drifted back to Nathan again. Where was he? Was he thinking about me? Was he talking to her about me? Was she telling him what to feel, what to think? I turned on my side, staring at the dark ceiling. A soft fear filled me. A fear I hadn't dared to admit before. What if I've already lost him forever? The thought felt like a knife pressed lightly against my heart. Not cutting yet. Just threatening to. I covered my face with my hands and whispered, "Please, not completely. Don't take him from me." I didn't know who I was pleading to. God, fate, the universe. Or the little boy inside my grown son who might still remember who I used to be. The next day, something unexpected happened. The address came within seconds. A small cafe not far from my apartment. I changed my clothes slowly, the fabric of my sweater catching on my trembling fingers. As I tied my hair back, my reflection in the mirror looked unfamiliar. Older. Tired. Almost emptied. I walked to the cafe with a quiet kind of dread following me like a shadow. When I entered, the warm smell of coffee and vanilla filled the air. But it did nothing to calm the storm inside me. At a corner table sat a woman I didn't know. She looked to be in her late 40s, hair neatly tied, eyes holding a kind of sadness that felt too familiar. When she saw me, she stood up immediately. "Mrs. Ward?" she asked softly. I nodded. "Please sit," she said, her voice gentle but urgent. I'm Sarah. I work at the finance firm your son recently visited." "Finance firm?" My heart skipped slightly. She took a breath before continuing. "I know this is unusual, but what did you see?" I whispered. She hesitated, then leaned in. "Your son came to our office 3 days ago. He and his wife. They were asking about transferring ownership of your assets." A cold numbness spread through my chest. I blinked slowly. "My assets?" "Yes," she said. "They were insistent. They claimed you were old, confused, and that they needed control to manage things." My hands clutched the edge of the table. "I'm not confused," I said softly, more to myself than to her. "I know," she replied quickly. "That's why I reached out to you." Something felt wrong. The way she spoke, the way he stayed silent, it didn't feel like concern. It felt like intention. My throat tightened painfully. I had feared this, but hearing it confirmed was like feeling the betrayal stitch itself deeper into my skin. "Mrs. Ward, forgive me," she said gently. "But are you safe? Do you have someone you trust?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, I have someone." She exhaled in relief. "Good. Then please be careful. They're planning something. And it's not out of love." My eyes burned. Not with anger. With grief so heavy it felt like grief for someone still alive. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you for telling me." She touched my hand lightly. "No mother deserves this." And then she left. I sat in that cafe for a long time, staring at nothing, hearing everything. My son. My only child. The boy whose forehead I kissed when he was scared. The boy whose nightmares I chased away. The boy whose tears I dried with my shawl. The boy who once held my hand so tightly as if the world would swallow him without me. That boy was gone. And in his place stood a man who thought my existence was an obstacle in the path of his comfort. I walked home slowly, each step heavier than the last. When I reached my apartment, I didn't turn on the lights. I stood in the living room with my coat still on, staring at the darkness, letting it swallow me. Because sometimes darkness is kinder than truth. After a while, I picked up my phone and called Daniel. He answered immediately. "I'm coming over," he said, not waiting for an explanation. When he arrived, he didn't ask what happened. He saw my face and understood. He closed the door quietly and sat beside me, letting the silence speak first. He went to a firm," I whispered finally. "He tried to move everything into his name." Daniel's jaw tightened, but his voice remained gentle. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "He didn't even ask me," I whispered. "He didn't talk to me. He didn't wonder if I needed that money. He didn't think about what I wanted. He just assumed I was something to claim." Tears slipped down my cheeks silently. "I think I lost him long before the wedding," I whispered. "And I was too blinded by love to see it." Daniel didn't speak. He didn't need to. Sometimes silence is the softest way of holding someone's breaking heart. After a few minutes, I continued. "I don't want revenge," I said. "I don't want to punish him. I don't want to fight him. I just can't live near him anymore. I can't keep hoping for the little boy who isn't there." Daniel nodded slowly. "You don't have to," he said. "You can choose peace now." Peace. What a strange word. So simple. So small. Yet it felt unreachable my whole life. "I want to move to the other house," I said. Quietly. Without telling them. He exhaled as if relieved. "That's the best thing you can do. Can you help me?" I asked. "I will handle everything," he replied. "You won't lift a finger." My eyes softened, gratitude warming a part of me that had forgotten warmth. And so, over the next few days with Daniel's help, I packed my things. Not much, just what I needed, just what held meaning. Every item carried a memory. Every memory carried weight. I packed slowly, touching everything as if saying goodbye. The apartment grew emptier by the hour. And strangely, instead of feeling sorrow, I felt lighter. The night before I left, I wrote a letter. Not for Camilla. Not for the world. Only for Nathan. The words trembled as I wrote, soft and quiet. Just like the way I had lived my entire life. "My son, I will always love you. Even in your absence. Even in your silence. But I cannot stay where my love is used instead of respected. I hope one day you understand what dignity feels like. And I hope life teaches you gently. If you ever need me, you know where to find me. But today, I choose peace. Mom. I left the letter on the kitchen counter. Place he would see. A place he once came to every morning for breakfast. And before sunrise, I left quietly. No noise. No drama. No tears. Just a soft goodbye to a place that had seen every part of me. When I reached the new house, the house I had bought in secret years ago, it felt strange at first. Too quiet. Too spacious. Too unfamiliar. But Daniel stayed until the furniture was arranged, until the lights were working, until he was sure I wouldn't need anything. When he was about to leave, I touched his arm lightly. Thank you, I whispered. You showed me kindness when my own child couldn't. He shook his head. Everyone deserves someone who sees them, he replied softly. And I see you. After he left, I stood by the window and watched the sun rise over a new sky. It didn't erase the wounds. It didn't fix the past. It didn't bring back the little boy. But it brought something else. A beginning. A quiet, gentle beginning. Days passed. Then weeks. Then months. I didn't hear from Nathan. Not one call. Not one message. First it hurt. Then it simply became the truth. Some losses don't break you. They reveal you. I began living slowly. Watering the plants. Baking small meals. Reading old books. Walking in the garden. Learning how to exist without waiting for footsteps at the door. Sometimes grief sits beside me like an old companion. Sometimes peace sits there instead. I've learned to accept both. And then one evening, just as the sky was turning a soft purple, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, Nathan stood there. But not the man I saw at the wedding. Not the man who defended her more than he remembered me. This Nathan had swollen eyes, unshaved cheeks, shaking hands. Mom, he whispered, voice breaking. I didn't say anything. I just stood there. He placed a trembling hand on the doorframe. She left, he said. She took everything. Everything I had, she's gone. I closed my eyes for a moment. I'm sorry, I whispered. He shook his head, tears falling. No, I'm sorry. For everything. For what I became. For hurting you. I didn't open my arms. I didn't run to him. I didn't collapse into apologies or forgiveness. I simply stepped aside and said softly, come inside. You look tired. Because forgiveness is not a moment. Forgiveness is a journey. As he walked in, I felt the past and present breathe together. He wasn't the little boy anymore. I wasn't the same mother anymore. But life had brought him back. Not perfect. Not unchanged. But humbled. We sat quietly on the sofa. Not talking. Not repairing. Just being. And maybe that's how some stories end. Not with grand closure. Not with dramatic promises. But with two broken hearts learning how to be in the same room again. I don't know what our future holds. I don't know how long this fragile peace will last. I don't know if trust can grow again. But for now, in this soft, quiet moment, I am simply a mother. And he is simply my son. And that is enough. The end.